These TIG welding tools would have saved me a ton of time when I first started to learn. Only problem was I didn't know about them. Okay, so the first thing we're gonna go over here is honestly pretty simple, and most people know about this one, but I genuinely need these next to me at all times when I am welding. These are my welding pliers here. It may seem simple, but these are for way more than just tightening up parts in your torch. Obviously, these are extremely important when you are putting your gear together to make sure it's put together properly, but having a good pair of these puppies that you've had for years are gonna help you out with a lot of other things as well. For example, when you are first learning, what is something that happens all the time when you are welding? Everybody's familiar with that one? It's all good. Even as a professional, this still happens relatively often, and this is something that I use these pliers for. After you dip your tungsten into your welding area, you're gonna need to take everything apart. So as you unscrew your gear after dipping, you're gonna notice that inside your cup, there's gonna be splatter or debris that has built up. This stuff is really bad to your welding quality. It can cause turbulence with your gas flow, and it honestly happens way easier than you think it might. This can also cause your arc to start to flicker at low amperages. This is also called arc deflection. But here's what I do with these pliers here. I always use the tip of one side of the pliers to scrape out the inside of the cup. This is gonna get rid of any splatter or debris that is accumulated in here. And this is especially important with a smaller cup for a diffuser setup like this here. But honestly, I always use these things to keep the inside of the cup clean. And then after I'm finished scraping it out with these, I use a wire brush. Brushing around the inside of your cup is gonna help to get rid of any other finer stuff like smoke or soot or whatever. You can also use it to gently remove any splatter from a screen on a gas lens. And I use the word gently. Now, something else that these are great for is that every time you finish a welding pass, the joint that you're working on is going to be extremely hot. Even with the nicest gloves on the planet, if you grab something that's freshly welded, smoking hot, it's gonna cause your gloves to shrink or become misshapen, or unfortunately, you can get some pretty severe burns even through good gloves. I always use pliers like this to maneuver stuff around on my table in between passes or after I'm finished welding something. Seriously, a pair of these pliers goes way further than just tightening the stuff in your torch. Now later in this episode, I'm actually going to show you a few extra things that you can do to prevent yourself from being burned by hot stuff or working around items that are hot on a project. Those tips are going to blow your mind. Stay tuned for those. Now, number 2, after the welding pliers, there we go, is a pair of good gloves. We just talked about this. Now, as far as finding a glove that works best for you, everybody has different preferences of what they like. My main advice to everybody out there might basically just be don't buy the cheapest gloves you can find. Don't do it. Buy the gloves that have the best fit for your hands and have the best dexterity so you can feel things in your fingers. And if they last even longer and they are great quality, that's even better. But the most important thing is that we want to be able to feel everything in our hands as best as we can. Maneuvering the filler material in your hands, as well as the dexterity you need to work with your torch, is extremely important. I need to feel everything as best as I can in my hands. I'm also going to need to be able to flex and move my wrists as easy as I can. I don't want any gloves that are going to restrict that motion too much. This is why having good pairs of gloves like these ones here are extremely important to me. It seems pretty simple, but this is an absolute no-go if I don't have gloves that are not comfortable. I have trained people in the past who have purchased really cheap gloves simply because they didn't want to spend a lot of money. They fit like crap, they don't last that long, and they restrict your movement, so they make the learning curve of you learning how to TIG weld much more difficult and a lot longer than it needs to be. Like we talked about, good movement, good dexterity, and make sure that they cover up your skin properly. You want them to go all the way up past your wrist so they cover up any gap you may have in between your sleeve and the glove. You do not want any exposed skin. You want to be able to tuck your sleeves on the inside comfortably and again maintaining good wrist dexterity. This is how you're going to prevent any nasty burns from accidentally touching hot stuff on your table. Or another thing that can happen with any exposed skin is you can get a severe sunburn in a matter of seconds there. Don't use cheap gloves. Don't use gloves that have holes or tears in the palm of them or fingers or anything like that. Super important. Okay, so I consider those first couple things on the list to be obviously pretty basic requirements. But now, let's get into the stuff that nobody told me when I was first getting going with TIG welding. You ready? Now, I've mentioned these a little bit here and there on my channel before, but if you haven't seen these yet, check this out. This is gonna blow you away. Check this out right here. This here is Lemon Pledge Dust Spray. I consider this to be the magical spray that just makes life better when you are welding. You can literally buy this at the grocery store. I have had people argue with me about there being better options of things that you can use. But I've used this stuff for over 20 years on my gear and it works perfect. Even with my nice lens on my helmet here, it does stay relatively clean. But once every couple weeks, I pop everything on this helmet completely apart. It just takes a couple seconds to do, and after taking everything apart, I give it a light spray with this stuff, and using a really fine cloth, I wipe everything down. What this does is it actually fills in any tiny scratches on your lenses. It's gonna clear off any dust or anything like that. It's gonna bring your lenses back to life as if they're brand new. When I was in welding school, I would be doing stick welding tests that were like overhead over my helmet. And honestly, every couple of hours, I would bust out my can of this stuff that I had in my tool bag. I would wipe my lenses completely down with this stuff. And obviously it didn't take care of any of the really heavy burn marks. It would take out a lot of the light scratching as well as all of the smoke and make this area clean as crystal, glass, diamonds, I don't know. Something super clean. My teacher actually used to ask me if I was actually welding in my booth because my helmet was so clean. And yes, I was always welding because I was able to see clearly, and it was because I was using this stuff here. And another thing, listen, this stuff smells absolutely incredible. I definitely considered myself to be one of the best smelling students in the class. Okay, are you ready for this one? This one is gonna blow your mind. All of the stuff I've mentioned here has been super important, but what if I told you that one of the most important things that I need when I'm TIG welding is probably laying around your shop right now and you haven't even realized how important it is? It's these things here, check it out. And looking at them, these are a few things that very few people actually know what to use them for. Like I mentioned, they're usually laying around your shop, not being used, or literally garbage that's going to get thrown out and you can use it to help you out a ton. Okay, here we go. Number 4 on our list, and absolutely one of the most important ones on this list. Once again, it's these things here. These are clamps and blocks of wood or scrap material. Now first, blocks of wood, that actually is garbage. What are you talking about? These things are so important. I told you, look at these blocks here. I have literally had these here in my shop for years now. And before, when I worked at my old shop, I used these things for over a decade there. Honestly, these blocks are probably close to 20 years old, and I would be lost if I did not have them. Okay, let's start with these things here. This is what I call hand steadies. Getting comfortable when you're TIG welding is one of the most important things for sure. And sometimes it's just the ability to lift your hand up a little more comfortably like this here. You can have your hand positioned just here like this. I'm rock solid and super stable and my hand isn't resting on anything hot at all. This is an angle that I do all the time with different types of joints. I call this an overhand grip. Now what I'll do is I'll use a combination of a few things to get absolutely comfortable before I weld anything with an overhand grip. And no matter what angle I'm welding from, what type of joint I'm actually welding, I can get set up rock solid and stable and my hands can stay nice and cool without touching anything hot. I used to weld big projects like this. Look at all the welding on a box like this. This thing is huge. Tons of outside corner welding that went on forever, MIG welding and wire feed all over it. As I'm welding something like this, it would be getting smoking hot. And what I would do as I was working on something like this is I would just position myself so that I had a block of wood under my hand. I would sometimes be able to slide it along wherever I needed to. Sometimes the wood obviously would get a little bit hot. You might notice a little bit of slight smoky smell here and there. But again, you just take it off, flip it over, or grab another piece of wood. Burning a little piece of wood a little bit is a lot better than burning your hand a little bit. Now the final project in my TIG welding aluminum program, and again, you can check these classes out there in the description below. You take them online at your own convenience. When you're finishing the final project in that program, you're gonna need a couple of these little wood blocks and they are gonna help you out so much. They can position whatever project you're working on a little better on the table so you can get better angles to see clearly as well as weld more comfortably. And again, like we talked about, as well as preventing your hand from getting burned. Okay, now back to these things here. These are made from aluminum scrap material. I do not remember why I made them this way with a certain amount of layers that you see here. Like I said, I made these like way over a decade ago, but they are absolutely worth their weight in gold. Matter of fact, if you look at welding videos on my channel, you will see these same two blocks being used hundreds of times. These are perfect for raising my pieces up a little bit better so I can get a little bit of an angle to weld them. There's just a lot of joints that honestly are a little bit easier to work on when they're elevated up off the table a little bit. In my programs online, I actually show people which joints are a little better to elevate off the table, and every student makes their own little blocks like this here. And again, to help you out if you're just getting going, these little blocks here are literally made out of garbage scrap material. They're a little heavier because they're obviously solid aluminum. These are gonna help to absorb a little more heat before getting into your hand or something like that. Now, if those were helpful, here's something else that's gonna help you out even more. This stuff is even more important when you get into more challenging projects later on with your TIG welding progression. Check this out. Sometimes when you're working on jobs that are a little bit more custom, things that are a little bit more challenging, you have no real options as far as where to put your hand. You either actually don't have anywhere that you can physically put your hand or rest your forearm on anything as you're welding. This is really common when people are working on roll cages inside of vehicles. I see this very frequently with that. I used to work in a motorsports shop doing stuff on race cars, and I had to deal with this all the time. You're welding in really awkward spaces. There's absolutely nowhere that you can comfortably or reliably put your hand, or even be sure that the surfaces that you are touching are gonna remain cool because things heat up as you're welding them, like we talked about. This is where these clamps come into play. Check this out. For example, if I have this length of pipe that I'm gonna weld a cap on the top, sometimes you just don't have the option to lay this down in a comfortable way to get good access to it. Try this out. Instead of trying to put your hand on it to try and stay comfortable, and obviously this thing's gonna start to heat up as you start to weld it, or even just free floating it with your hands, attach a clamp like this. Now you can literally just put your hand safely on this instead. This is gonna give you a much better angle to put your hand where you want it. And obviously it's not gonna be heating up nearly as fast, so your hand can stay cooler for much longer. Obviously these clamps might heat up a little bit after extensive welding. You can switch to another clamp if you have one ready to go, or here's another option that'll help you out a lot. Clamps on clamps. Use something like this Bessie clamp here. This is a really sturdy clamp. You can also use pipe clamps. These work really well. You attach this somewhere where the heat isn't going to be conducting into it. And again, like I talked about, this is very helpful for working on something like a roll cage or complex out of position type of stuff. Actually, when I was going to school and I was doing testing all the time, especially with overhead welding, I always wanted to have something that I could confidently rest my hands on. So look at this here. You can see the fixture that everybody probably recognizes if they're familiar with welding tests. There's an arm where you attach your welding piece here, but I would attach a pipe clamp to this area here, and then that clamp would stretch across somewhere wherever I wanted to put it, and I could confidently and comfortably rest my hand on this instead. At this point here, you are completely detached from the workpiece that is going to be heating up. And like I said, you can slide these clamps around wherever you want for comfort. This gives you total freedom to remain comfortable, see clearly, as well as make sure nothing is heating up. I've used this trick like I talked about in schooling, as well as tons of custom jobs where I'm doing out of position stuff that I can't really rely on being able to put my hands where they're gonna stay cool or stay comfortable. The combination of these things here is gonna give you so much freedom to remain comfortable as you are TIG welding. It just takes a little bit of creativity as well as a bit of planning before you start, because like I talked about, you've got this stuff laying around, why not use it? Burns are definitely common as far as injuries. We've talked about this quite a bit here, but there are other injuries that you need to be careful about. I don't know about you, but what's one of the most common injuries you hear about when people have been welding for a long amount of time? These are some things that I used to deal with back in my heavy production days, and these were back injuries, neck injuries, as well as hand and wrist injuries. And I'm not talking about an injury where like something falls on your wrist and hurts you. These are injuries that creep up over a long amount of time. They're kind of these nagging things that just start to feel kind of funny at first, but then after months of dealing with it, it gets worse and worse. Now, this is why I saved this tip for last. While everything that we've been over on this list so far has been able to give you an immediate return as far as getting an improvement with comfort or something like that, this tip that we're gonna go over here is something that's more of a long-term investment, but the payoff in using this stuff as far as a long-term investment to yourself can keep you welding for decades pain-free. Check out these things right here. Yes, my friend, these are not actual welding tools, but these are gonna be some of the most important things that are gonna keep you welding for a very long time. Check this out. Like I said, I used to deal with some massive problems with wrist injuries. My shoulders as well as my neck would bother me a lot in long-term production welding, and I definitely had some problems with my lower back. Again, these were not incidents that injured me. It was just stuff that felt a little weird at first, and then after months and months of not doing anything about it, it actually became a real problem. And I know a lot of people who have dealt with these types of injuries. They've had to take time off work to rest up. They've had to go spend tons of money on physiotherapy and stuff like that, as well as go on long-term disability. But I did learn how to prevent these problems for myself, and here's how I did it. And again, people, I am almost 42 years old, and I feel better and more healthy than I did at 22 years old. Let's start off with the really common stuff here, back and neck injuries. I once went to a chiropractor to get some help one time. My neck was really bothering me, it was really sore, and after a few minutes of taking a look at my neck, he said, "Oh, no big deal, you've got welder's neck." That's right, to him, this is an actual thing, and this is what it's from. It's from years of doing this. You see that right there, that little flick that everybody thinks looks super cool? Like I also said, sometimes my low back would give me problems from sitting in a chair all day doing welding production, as well as carelessly lifting stuff and not really doing anything to take care of myself. There's a million different things that you can do as far as stretching, exercising, all different types of things. But this thing here might be the biggest shortcut to give you a lot of relief with problems in your neck and back really quickly. This is a foam roller. You can buy these at Walmart, for God's sakes. Throwing it down on the floor, rolling out your back and your neck on this thing absolutely helps to loosen all of the muscles that I get aggravated when I'm welding for long hours. Having a sore neck, gently rolling over something like this, and then focusing around the areas on my back carefully. After a while, you're gonna notice this thing gets all the little cracks and pops out of your back and neck. It's gonna loosen up all the muscles that get aggravated from a lot of welding you may be doing all day. Even when I'm on holidays, I take this thing wherever I go. This is a trip to Australia. I was not doing any welding, and you can see my foam roller just kicking around. This is something that I usually hit first thing in the morning after I wake up, as well as a couple times throughout the day just to take some breaks. And did you know that sore backs can also come from having problems with your legs? Basically from standing all day on a cold floor at a workbench like this here, pretty much just leaning forward, working on stuff around my table. The muscles in the back of your legs and even your butt, that's right, they're gonna get locked up and tight without you knowing it. We're talking about tight butts here. These contributed to a lot of problems that I had over the years with my low back. I literally just thought I had a bad back. How stupid is that? But after working on these areas, these problems started to go away. If you do not have back problems right now, you're young and healthy, ready to kick ass, this stuff is preventable. Like I said, you're not gonna do this and then have immediate results right away. I had a physiotherapist tell me that these injuries build up over a long amount of time, and they also take a long amount of time to incrementally get rid of. If you're lucky enough not to be dealing with any of these problems right now working in the trades, I recommend that you start taking care of this stuff now before it becomes a problem. Look at these here. These are golf balls. Holy moly, you can find these anywhere. I roll them up and down my forearms, in between the muscles in my hands. Taking care of your hands, these things are the most important tools that we all work with. People take the time to make sure that the tools on their table are nice and clean and taken care of, brand new. Why the heck wouldn't you do the same thing with these things here you need for everything else in life? After welding all day, I would literally go home and dip my hands and wrists inside a giant bowl of ice. They would be so sore. I vividly remember the amount of pain I used to feel in my wrists. These would affect me all weekends. I couldn't do anything. It sucked. And again, I just thought I had bad wrists. Weird. Oh well. No, dude, you're not taking care of your shit. Before you experience problems with your hands or wrists, take care of everything. Before coffee breaks at work, I would literally just stop working like a couple minutes early. I would grab my foam roller and hit my neck and my back real quick, hit my legs quickly, and then grab the golf ball and roll out my arms. Literally doing this for 2 or 3 minutes a few times throughout the day is going to make a huge impact over the course of a few months, I promise you. Do not try and grind this out being sore all the time. It's your body, take care of it. Consult a doctor if you need to, or a physiotherapist to get some advice on how to go about this. If you have problems with this type of stuff already, be careful, but honestly, start taking care of these problems. We all want to be welding for a really long amount of time. This is fun. Whether you're doing it professionally for production or you're just doing stuff in your garage because you like welding, if you don't do these things to get ahead of these problems, you're gonna have to be taking time off welding, or unfortunately, some people have to quit entirely. You've probably seen on my channel with every welding demonstration I do, I never do the helmet flick. Look at this footage here. I'm always using my hand to flip my helmet down. I get set up, I lower my helmet when I'm ready, and since I started doing this, I have not had any problems with my neck. With my foam roller and all this other stuff I've shared with you here, as well as not doing the helmet flick, and again, it sucks because it looks so cool. These are some of the most important things that are going to help you stay welding for a long amount of time and not be miserable while you're doing it. Now, we talked a lot about some tools, but here's some even more important tools. In this episode here, these are some of the most important tools that I go over that are going to help to get you immediate great results with your TIG welding. And these are literally just a few bucks at your local welding or hardware shop. Watch this episode here next. I show you exactly how to use them. Do a random act of kindness for a stranger today. I'm Dusty James. Fill and chill. Talk soon. Peace.